One day, surfing OLX, it's something like Ukrainian eBay, I found an interesting and profitable offer for me. Someone was selling a GTX 780 Ti performed by Inno3D for only 1500 hryvnias. Without thinking for a long time, I contacted the seller about the product that sunk into my soul so much. After a few leading questions and a video that he sent to me, I made sure that everything with the GPU is fine, but I agreed to buy it for 1200 hryvnias. And here it is, just look at it. What a size, what a design, what an impressive TDP, only some 265 watts, but believe me, that will not be a problem. It weighs 1 kilogram 200 grams, and that is really impressive. The fans, I attach it to the radiator with hex bolts. And I have a question for you guys, have you ever seen something like that before? By the way, the backplate and fence mount are made of metal. The heat pipes are covered with nickel so that the copper does not oxidize and the heatsink does not deteriorate. And that's amazing quality. Back in 2013, when this GPU was just released, it costed around 10,000 of hryvnias, and 2 years later almost 16,000. And now I bought it only for 1200 hryvnias. Let's finally test it in modern games and find out what this three-wheeled piece of plastic is capable of. It will compete with RX 580 for 4GB, and the test bench, as always in my tests, is a cheap kit from AliExpress. We haven't time to talk about this kit, so I will just leave the link in the description. If you're interested, check it out by yourself. The only thing I need to say is that the CPU will not be a bottleneck. Now all I need is just to insert it. Shit, something is wrong here. The GPU is big as hell. Since the GPU is powered by 6 plus 8 pins, the TDP is 265 watts, my power supply is not able to provide such an impressive power, and after just 3 minutes of testing the GPU in firmware, the computer turned itself off. That is because at 12 volts the power supply produces only 312 watts, and we still need to supply the CPU, the motherboard and the other things. Therefore, I will use 2 power supplies. The most powerful will supply the GPU, and the other, branded but very old, will supply other things. With the help of such a wire, I will synchronize the work of 2 power supplies. It must be inserted into the 24-pin connectors on both power supplies and close the green wires to them. But do it very carefully, because electricity is not a toy. Doom Eternal is the first game on our test, and you may get the impression that the AMD GPU has higher graphic settings, but it's not. The recording was carried out through the overlays of the presented GPUs, and the AMD overlay had higher bitrate. It has almost no effect on FPS. Nevertheless, the FPS on the GTX 780 Ti is almost 2 times lower. I set the settings to absolute nightmare, and except the textures, I set them up so they could fit into 3GB of VRAM. The next game is Half-Life Alyx, and I really doubt that someone of you will play it on monitor, but we have tests here in modern games, so do not complain. I set the graphic settings to maximum, and to my surprise, it performs well. It shows around 100 FPS, and this game has 120 FPS lock, which I didn't have enough brain cells to remove, but it doesn't matter because you can navigate by GPU load, and as you maybe noticed it, the FPS is higher on 780 Ti. 120 FPS at the same time the GPU is underloaded. Far Cry New Dawn. Silly developers made a mistake and wrote the wrong letter in the title, but I corrected it. All settings are at maximum. If the FPS ranges from 40 to 80 in the benchmark, then in game it's quite stable. You can even set the virtual resolution higher. In fact, these GPUs are on par. Do not pay attention on the maximum number of the frames on RX 580. This result is due to the freezes, because some games were recorded to HDD. Battlefield 5 as usual maximum settings, of course without RTX, and image scaling is 100%. On RX 580 we see more FPS, but on both GPUs the game is playable. Control. We have a maximum settings without ray tracing, and here the spread in FPS is not that big, like it was in Battlefield for example. RX 580 shows better performance. Frame time is stable, performing well in Full HD. Next up are two graphic demanding games, it's Resident Evil and Star Wars, which didn't launch it on my PC with GTX 780 Ti. Due to the laziness, I didn't even try to find a problem and say that both games have flexible graphic settings, so I think that you will be able to play these games on GTX 780 Ti, but not on the highest graphic settings of course. The Outer Worlds, and in it GTX 780 Ti shows 10 FPS more than AMD GPU, and that is the first game today that was able to lower the GTX 780 this hard. Today that is the only game that was able to warm up the GPU to 65 degrees, which is still very good. Of course, firmware showed me the maximum temperature and heated the GPU to 69 degrees, and this is the temperature of the video card with a TDP of 265 watts. For you to understand, our Aorus RX 580 runs up to 81 degrees in firmware while it has a TDP of 185 watts, but it's only 150. Think about it, it has a TDP of 100 watts less and the temperature is 12 degrees higher. Okay, our final game, Sekiro. Not that demanding game, at least for Nvidia GPUs. On AMD I can say that it's much worse, but still. And again, this shitty 60 FPS lock, which I was not able to remove. Look at the GPU load. Green one is not loaded to the maximum, and the red one is working on 100%. You have seen the tests. I'm really shocked because despite of the age of it, I will remind you 7 years or 9 years for today's moment, the video was recorded in 2020, the GPU still can handle the modern games. This GPU is somewhere in the middle between 3GB version of 1060 and 1050 Ti. And of course, buying it right now is not a good idea. I can even say that it's a bad idea because it's very old and it eats a lot of electricity and you need powerful power supply unit. So if you want to buy something cheap and used, better buy GTX 1060 or 1050 Ti. The difference in price will not be that big, but you will buy really better GPU. Personally, I bought 780 Ti because I wanted to record this video for you, and if the seller hadn't lowered the price by 300 hryvnias, this video would not have happened. It's really important for me to know what do you think about this video. Read all comments, so I will be glad to see your criticism, but of course only normal. If I will not like it, your comment will be deleted.